The ancient dust swirled around Dr. Amanda Torres as she carefully brushed away centuries of debris from the crystalline surface. Her hands trembled slightly as the artifact began to glow with a soft blue light, responding to her touch after lying dormant for thousands of years. The excavation site on Valdres 7 had been promising, but nothing had prepared her team for what they were about to uncover. Torres stepped back as the crystal pulsed brighter, casting eerie shadows across the underground chamber they had discovered 3 days earlier. Her assistant, David Park, adjusted the recording equipment while Dr. Kim Walsh documented every detail with her scanner. The ruins around them stretched deeper into the planet's crust than any previous archaeological find in known galactic history. The crystal suddenly projected a holographic interface filled with symbols that none of them recognized. Torres had spent 15 years studying ancient civilizations across the galaxy, but these markings were completely alien to her. She activated her translation matrix, hoping the universal language protocols would make sense of the writing. Slowly, words began to form in the air above the crystal. Torres read aloud as the translation appeared. Imperial Archive, Corvani Empire, Stellar Cycle 847,293. Final entry, Subjugation Protocol Division. Her voice echoed through the chamber as her team gathered closer, their excitement building. With each translated word, the hologram shifted, displaying what appeared to be a three-dimensional map of this sector of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked with various symbols, most showing the same imperial seal. Torres realized she was looking at the territorial map of a civilization that had controlled more space than any current galactic power. Park whistled softly. Amanda, look at the scale of this thing. If this map is accurate, the Corvani controlled over 3,000 star systems. That's bigger than the current Galactic Federation. Walsh frowned as she studied her readings. The dating is consistent across all the artifacts we found. This empire existed approximately 12,000 years ago, but there's no record of them in any galactic database. How does a civilization this large just disappear from history? Torres continued reading the projected text as more entries appeared. The archive contained detailed records of conquered species, integration protocols, and resource extraction data. Each entry was methodical and precise, showing a civilization that approached conquest like a science. Species after species had been cataloged, studied, and absorbed into the Corvani Empire with ruthless efficiency. One entry caught her attention. Species 2,847. Bipedal mammals from Sol 3, primitive technology level. Initial survey complete. Recommendation: low priority for integration. Subject species shows no significant threat potential or valuable resources. Implement Phase 1 monitoring only. Torres felt a chill run down her spine. Sol 3 was the ancient designation for Earth, humanity's homeworld. She scrolled through more entries, finding multiple references to Sol 3 primitives and human specimens. The Corvani had clearly made contact with early humanity, but had dismissed them as unimportant. The final entries in the archive became increasingly urgent in tone. Phase 1 protocol initiated with Sol 3 species. Initial integration teams deployed. Expect full compliance within standard cycle. Then, integration teams report unexpected difficulties with Sol 3 subjects, requesting additional resources for Phase 2 implementation. The next entry was fragmented. Phase 2 teams, no contact for 7 rotations. Sending relief expedition to Sol system, require immediate. The final coherent entry made Torres's blood run cold. All contact with Sol sector lost. Recommend. Immediate withdrawal from system showing unprecedented. Cannot explain the Emperor. They are not what we ... After that, the entries became corrupted data streams and garbled transmissions. The last readable timestamp was dated only weeks after the first mention of Phase 2 implementation. Walsh looked up from her scanner with confusion written across her face. Amanda, I'm reading massive energy signatures from deeper in the ruins. Whatever happened to end the civilization, it was sudden and catastrophic. The entire complex shows signs of hasty evacuation. Torres stood in silence, processing what she had discovered. An empire that had conquered thousands of worlds and subjugated hundreds of species had encountered early humanity and simply vanished from existence. The timeline suggested that within months of attempting to integrate Earth into their empire, the Corvani had ceased to exist as a functioning civilization. Park began documenting the chamber more thoroughly, his excitement obvious. This changes everything we know about early human history. First contact wasn't with the Xanthari traders 300 years ago. Humanity has been encountered by alien civilizations for millennia, but Torres was thinking about something else entirely. If the Corvani had dismissed humanity as primitive and harmless, what had caused such a powerful empire to disappear so completely? The correlation between their contact with Earth and their civilization's collapse seemed too significant to ignore. She activated her communication device to contact the university. This discovery would require extensive analysis and resources far beyond what her small expedition could provide. As she waited for the connection to establish, Torres continued reading through the archived entries, looking for any clue that might explain what had happened to the Corvani. More references to other species appeared in the records. The Corvani had catalogued remarkable diversity across their empire, but certain patterns emerged. Species that submitted quickly were integrated and survived. Those that resisted were eliminated efficiently. But humans seemed to fit neither category. The archive contained biological data on humanity that struck Torres as strangely detailed for a species they had dismissed as primitive. Genetic samples, behavioral analysis, and psychological profiles filled dozens of entries. For a low-priority species, the Corvani had certainly invested considerable resources in studying humanity. One entry particularly disturbed her. All three subjects demonstrate unusual adaptive capabilities. Standard integration protocols proving ineffective. Subjects appear to be learning from each contact encounter. Recommend elevated threat assessment. That entry was dated just days before all contact with Corvani integration teams was lost. As Torres prepared to transmit her findings back to the university, she couldn't shake the feeling that this discovery was just the beginning. If an empire as powerful as the Corvani had vanished after encountering humanity, what did that mean for the current galactic civilization that humanity was now part of? The crystal continued to pulse with its eerie blue light, holding secrets that would soon reshape everyone's understanding of humanity's true place in galactic history. The massive library halls of the Galactic Archaeological Council stretched endlessly in every direction, filled with the collected knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. Dr. Themel's 4 eyes scanned through holographic displays while his tentacles manipulated multiple data streams simultaneously. The Corvani discovery had consumed his thoughts for weeks, and what he was finding in the deep archives troubled him deeply. Torres sat across from him at the research station, her human patience wearing thin as the alien historian worked through databases at a pace no human could match. She had traveled halfway across the galaxy to present her findings to the council, but Thingel's reaction had been far more intense than she had expected. There, Thingel's translator device rendered his clicking speech into standard galactic. I have found what I suspected, Dr. Torres. Your discovery of the Corvani archive is not unique. There have been others. Torres leaned forward as Thymel projected a timeline spanning the last 50,000 years of galactic history. Marked along the timeline were the rise and fall of major civilizations, each empire lasting between 8 and 15,000 years, before disappearing completely. The Sethric hegemony, Thymel gestured to the oldest entry. They controlled 2,000 star systems for 12,000 years. Archaeological evidence suggests they were master geneticists who could adapt any species to serve their needs. Their final records mention discovering a promising primitive world in the Sol region, before all contact with their expeditionary forces ceased. Torres felt the familiar chill she had experienced in the Corvani ruins. How long after that contact did their civilization end? Approximately 40 standard years? The timeline varies, but the pattern remains consistent. Thymel manipulated the display to highlight the next civilization. The Valdori Collective followed 8,000 years later. They were energy beings who could possess and control organic minds across vast distances. Their archives also mention Sol-3 and bipedal carbon-based entities with unusual neural resistance. The pattern continued through civilization after civilization. The Nexari Federation, master builders who could reshape entire star systems. The Korth Empire, time manipulators who could accelerate or slow temporal fields around their enemies. The Zephyrian Dominants, reality weavers who could alter the fundamental laws of physics within their territory. Each had been the dominant galactic power of their era. Each had encountered early humanity and dismissed them as primitive. And each had vanished from history within decades of that contact. Torres studied the timeline with growing unease. Thamal, are you suggesting that humanity somehow caused the downfall of every major galactic civilization for the past 50,000 years? I am suggesting that the correlation is too significant to ignore. Thamal's tentacles moved frantically across his controls, but here is what disturbs me most. In every case, the civilizations initially cataloged humans as harmless primitives. Yet their final records always upgrade humanity's threat assessment to maximum levels. The display shifted to show fragmentary records from each civilization's final days. Torres read them with mounting horror. The Sethrak described humans as genetically impossible to modify. The Valdori called them mentally uncontrollable. The Nexari reported structural adaptation beyond theoretical limits. They all reached the same conclusion in their final days, Thymal continued, that humans were not what they appeared to be. But by then it was too late. Torres stood and paced around the research station, her mind racing through the implications. But that's impossible. Human history shows we were genuinely primitive during those periods. We had no space travel, no advanced technology, barely any global civilization. Yet somehow, every galactic superpower that encountered your species ceased to exist. Thamal pulled up another set of data. Dr. Torres, I have been analyzing the genetic and archaeological data from your Earth. The results are disturbing. The display showed human genetic diversity maps spanning the last 50,000 years. Torres saw what Thamal had discovered: periodic bottlenecks in human population that corresponded exactly with the visitation dates from each civilization. Your species shows signs of repeated genetic modification, Thamal explained. Not evolution modification. Someone or something has been altering humanity's development throughout your entire history. But the changes are not random. They appear designed to enhance specific capabilities, adaptability, learning capacity, technological integration, and resistance to external control. Torres stared at the genetic data in disbelief. You're saying humans have been artificially enhanced or restored? The base genetic template suggests capabilities far beyond what current humanity demonstrates. As if your species once possessed abilities that were deliberately suppressed. Thamal's voice carried an edge of fear. Dr. Torres, what if these civilizations did not simply encounter primitive humans? What if they encountered the remnants of something much more dangerous? The implication hit Torres like a physical blow. You think humanity was once a galactic power that was defeated and somehow contained on Earth? I think humanity might have been the galactic power that all others feared. Thamal manipulated the timeline again, extending it back beyond the oldest civilization records. There is a gap in the archaeological record, a period where we find evidence of advanced technology and massive construction projects, but no clear indication of which species was responsible. Torres examined the data showing massive engineering projects across the galaxy ring worlds. Dyson spheres, space elevators, and stellar manipulation technology that exceeded anything current civilizations could achieve. All of it dated to approximately 55,000 years ago, then abruptly stopped. Someone built all of this and then vanished completely, Torres whispered. And then 8,000 years later, the first of the civilizations we've been tracking rose to power, only to fall when they encountered the descendants of whatever built those ancient megastructures. Thamal's tentacles moved nervously. Doctor, Torres, I believe your species may be the survivors of the galaxy's most advanced civilization, somehow reduced to a primitive state and contained on a single world. Torres felt the weight of the revelation settling over her. And every time a new galactic power discovers Earth and tries to study or conquer humanity, they inadvertently trigger some kind of awakening that leads to their own destruction. Thimal finished. The question is whether this awakening is conscious or instinctual. Do humans deliberately destroy these civilizations, or is it simply an inevitable result of contact? The research station chimed softly, indicating another data stream had completed processing. Thimal activated the display, and both researchers froze as they read the results. Dr. Torres? Thimal's voice was barely a whisper. This is current intelligence data on human space. Expansion over the last 3 centuries since your species achieved faster-than-light travel. The rate of technological advancement, territorial expansion, and diplomatic integration with other species. Torres studied the projection showing humanity's rapid spread across hundreds of star systems. Their impossible rate of technological development and their uncanny ability to form alliances with species that had been enemies for millennia were doing it again, she realized. Humanity is following the same pattern that led to the downfall of every previous galactic civilization. We're adapting, learning, and expanding at a rate that should be impossible. Thimal's fear was evident even through the translator. And, if the pattern holds true, within the next few decades, current galactic civilization will cease to exist, leaving humanity as the dominant power until something eventually contains them again, starting the cycle anew. Torres activated her communication device to contact Earth. The Galactic Council needed to know what they had discovered, but she wondered if sharing this information would accelerate the very process they had uncovered. The pattern was clear, but the mechanism remained a mystery that could determine the fate of every sentient species in the galaxy. The bridge of the deep space vessel Endurance hummed with quiet efficiency as Captain Roth Blackwell reviewed the unusual passenger manifest. Dr. Thimal had specifically requested passage to Earth, despite the fact that most alien researchers were restricted from visiting humanity's homeworld. The official channels had denied the request, but something about the alien historian's urgency had convinced Blackwell to bend the rules. Blackwell found Thimal in the ship's laboratory, surrounded by data displays and artifacts that the alien had brought from the Galactic Archaeological Council. The captain had served on mixed-species crews for 10 years, but he had never seen a researcher work with such desperate intensity. Dr. Thimal, Blackwell said as he entered the lab, "We'll reach Earth orbit in 18 hours. I hope you can explain why this research was worth risking both our careers." Thimal's tentacles paused in their manipulation of the holographic displays. Captain Blackwell, are you familiar with your species' early history? Before space travel? Before global civilization? Blackwell shrugged. The basics. Primitive agriculture? Tribal warfare, slow technological development. Nothing particularly remarkable until the last few centuries. That is what your official records state. But Dr. Torres and I have discovered evidence suggesting your species' history is far more complex. Thimal activated a new display showing the timeline they had developed. Captain, we believe humanity may be responsible for the systematic destruction of every major galactic civilization for the past 50,000 years. Blackwell stared at the data in disbelief. The idea that primitive humans could have caused the downfall of advanced galactic empires seemed absurd, but the correlation was undeniable. Even if this pattern is real, how could Stone Age humans possibly threaten civilizations with faster-than-light travel? That is what we intend to discover on Earth. But, Captain, I must warn you about something we discovered during our research. Thimal's voice carried an edge of fear. We attempted to analyze Dr. Torres using standard neural mapping equipment to establish a baseline for human brain function. The equipment was completely destroyed. Blackwell frowned. Neural scanners are designed to work on any carbon-based intelligence. They're standard medical equipment. Not for humans, apparently. We attempted the scan 3 separate times with different equipment. Each device suffered catastrophic failure when aimed at Dr. Torres' neural patterns. It was as if her brain was actively rejecting analysis. The captain felt a chill of unease. You think there's something unusual about human brain structure? I think there's something unusual about humans in general. But I need to conduct tests on Earth to confirm my theories. Themol manipulated another display showing genetic data from multiple human samples. Captain, would you consent to some basic scans? Nothing invasive, just surface-level biological analysis. Blackwell nodded, curious despite his growing unease. Themol activated a portable scanning device and aimed it at the captain. Immediately, the device began sparking and smoking. Themol quickly shut it down before it could explode. Fascinating, the alien researcher muttered. The same reaction, but even more violent. Captain, has anyone ever successfully performed detailed neural scans on humans? Blackwell thought about his medical records. Standard medical scanners work fine for basic health monitoring. But now that you mention it, I don't think I've ever had the kind of detailed neural mapping that other species routinely undergo for psychological evaluation. Because it's impossible, Themol concluded. Human brains actively resist detailed analysis by alien technology. This suggests either remarkable natural evolution or deliberate engineering. As the Endurance approached Earth, Blackwell found himself studying his human crew with new eyes. Chief Engineer Lisa Park could integrate alien technology systems that should have been incompatible. Navigator Tom Wells seemed to instinctively understand alien spatial mathematics that had taken other species centuries to develop. Medical Officer Dr. Janet Ross had developed treatment protocols that worked on alien physiologies no human had previously encountered. Individually, each crew member's abilities seemed like natural talent. Collectively, they represented adaptation capabilities that should have been impossible for a species only recently introduced to. Galactic Civilization. Earth Traffic Control granted them landing permission at the restricted archaeological site in Antarctica, where Torres had established a research facility. The frozen continent seemed an unlikely place to uncover humanity's hidden past. But the deep ice surveys had revealed structures that predated known human civilization by millennia. The facility consisted of prefabricated modules connected by heated tunnels built around a massive excavation that descended deep into the Antarctic ice. Torres met them at the landing platform, her excitement obvious despite the harsh weather conditions. Roth, Dr. Themol, you have to see what we've found, Torres called over the wind. The structures go down at least 2 kilometers, and they're definitely artificial. But the construction techniques are unlike anything in the archaeological record. They descended through multiple levels of excavation, past layers of ice that represented thousands of years of accumulation. The deeper they went, the more obviously artificial the structures became. Smooth corridors carved from living rock. Chambers with perfect geometric proportions and technology interfaces that were clearly designed for human hands. How old are these structures? Blackwell asked as they reached the bottom level of the excavation. Initial dating suggests between 40 and 50,000 years, Torres replied. But that's impossible according to accepted human history. Our species shouldn't have possessed this level of technology until very recently. Themol examined the walls with his scanning equipment, noting that unlike the surface scans of humans, the ancient technology didn't resist his analysis. These structures were built by humans, but humans with capabilities far exceeding your current development level. The question is, what happened to reduce your species to the primitive state recorded in your official history? They entered a vast chamber filled with what appeared to be data storage systems. The technology was clearly human in design, but so advanced that none of them could immediately determine how to activate it. Torres had been working for weeks to decode the access protocols. We've managed to activate some of the peripheral systems, Torres explained as she led them to a functioning console. The data is stored in a format that human computers can read. But the content is encrypted with mathematical principles we don't fully understand. Blackwell approached the console, and the interface immediately responded to his presence. displaying symbols and diagrams that seemed somehow familiar despite being completely alien to his experience. Without conscious thought, his hands moved across the control surface and the chamber filled with holographic displays. "How did you know how to do that?" Torres asked in amazement. Blackwell stared at his hands in confusion. "I don't know. It just felt natural, like remembering something. I had forgotten." The holographic displays showed star maps, genetic diagrams, and what appeared to be historical records spanning hundreds of thousands of years. The data was clearly of human origin, but described a galactic civilization that had existed long before any known alien species had achieved space travel. Themael studied the displays with growing excitement and terror. "Captain, these records suggest that humans were not only the first galactic civilization, but the most advanced one in the galaxy's history. Your species had technology that current civilizations cannot even comprehend." One display caught Blackwell's attention. It showed Earth as it had existed 50,000 years ago, but the planet was completely different. Massive cities covered every continent, space elevators stretched into orbit, and the entire solar system was filled with human constructions. What happened to all of this? Blackwell asked as he navigated through the historical records with increasing fluency. The final entries in the database provided the answer, and it changed everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the galaxy. The holographic records filled the ancient chamber with images that defied everything Blackwell thought he knew about human history. The displays showed Earth as the center of a galactic civilization that spanned millions of star systems, with human colonies established across every habitable world in the galaxy. The technology depicted in the records surpassed anything current galactic powers had achieved. Torres watched in fascination as Blackwell navigated the interface with increasing skill, accessing records that had remained sealed for 50 millennia. His hands moved across the controls as if he had been trained to use the system, despite never having seen anything like it before. "These are population records," Blackwell said as he opened another data stream. Humanity numbered in the trillions across hundreds of thousands of worlds. But according to this timeline, something catastrophic happened approximately 52,000 years ago. Thymel studied the displays with his multiple eyes, his tentacles moving nervously as he processed the implications. "Captain, these records suggest that humans were not just another galactic civilization. You were the galactic civilization. Every current species in the galaxy developed under human influence or protection." The historical records painted a picture of humanity as benevolent shepherds of galactic development. Human scientists had guided the evolution of countless species, helping them achieve sentience and technological advancement. Human diplomats had prevented wars between emerging civilizations, while human engineers had built the massive structures that still dotted the galaxy. "We were gardeners," Blackwell realized as he read through the files. Humanity cultivated intelligent life throughout the galaxy, helping species develop their unique capabilities while preventing conflicts that could have destroyed them. Torres found herself drawn to the genetic records, which showed how humans had guided the development of every known alien species. "Look at this data. We didn't conquer or control other species. We helped them become the best versions of themselves. The Galactic Council species we know today, their ancestors were all influenced by human intervention. But the records also revealed why such an advanced civilization had fallen. The final entries described growing concern among human leaders about the species they had helped develop. Many alien civilizations had begun to view humanity's guidance as paternalistic control, leading to increasing tension across the galaxy. "The Coalition of Free Worlds," Blackwell read from the final historical entries. "It started as a diplomatic movement for species independence from human oversight, but it evolved into something much more dangerous." The records showed how the coalition had gradually turned from seeking independence to actively opposing human existence. Leaders from dozens of species had concluded that as long as humanity existed, other species would never be truly free to develop their own destinies. Thimel's translator conveyed his growing horror as he read the entries. They didn't just want independence. They wanted humanity extinct. But how could they possibly threaten a civilization as advanced as this? The answer lay in humanity's greatest strength and ultimate weakness. The same adaptability and benevolence that had allowed humans to guide galactic development also made them vulnerable to coordinated attack. The Coalition had used humanity's own protection protocols against them. "They turned our colonies into prisons," Torres whispered as she read the tactical reports. The Coalition convinced human colonies that Earth had fallen and that they needed to shelter in place for their own protection. Meanwhile, they isolated Earth from the rest of the galaxy and began systematic bombardment of human infrastructure. The records showed the brilliant cruelty of the Coalition's strategy. Instead of direct warfare, they had convinced humans to isolate themselves while spreading false information about devastating attacks. Human colonies had gone into protective lockdown, waiting for rescue that never came. While the Coalition dismantled human civilization piece by piece, Blackwell found the final entries from Earth's last free government. The Coalition saved the worst for last. They didn't just want to destroy human civilization, they wanted to ensure it could never rise again. The chamber filled with detailed schematics showing genetic modification protocols that had been used on the surviving human population. The Coalition scientists had identified the specific genetic markers that gave humans their remarkable adaptability and had systematically suppressed them. "They turned us into a nature preserve," Torres said as she studied the biological data. "The Coalition kept a breeding population of humans on Earth, but modified our genetics to prevent us from ever again developing advanced technology or space travel." Thamel examined the genetic suppression protocols with professional interest. Remarkable work, actually. They didn't simply reduce human intelligence. They created psychological blocks that would prevent humans from pursuing certain types of technological development. Your species retained creativity and problem-solving abilities, but lost the drive to build advanced civilizations. The records revealed how thoroughly the Coalition had planned humanity's containment. They had seeded human cultures with myths and stories that would discourage space exploration, modified human psychology to increase territorial conflicts that would prevent global unity, and established monitoring systems to ensure humanity never again threatened galactic stability. But they made a crucial error, Blackwell realized as he read the final technical specifications. The suppression protocols were designed to be temporary. They were supposed to gradually reduce human capabilities over several generations until we were no longer a threat. Torres found the critical flaw in the Coalition's plan. The genetic modifications were designed to degrade over time, eventually making humans completely passive. But our adaptability was stronger than they anticipated. Instead of degrading, the suppression protocols became integrated into our genetics. As a kind of evolutionary pressure, the revelation struck all three researchers simultaneously. The Coalition had intended to permanently cripple humanity, but instead had created a species that would appear harmless while secretly developing enhanced capabilities. Every generation of suppressed humans had become slightly more adaptable, more resistant to control, and more capable of rapid technological advancement. "We've been a trap for 50,000 years, Blackwell whispered. "Every time a new galactic civilization discovers Earth and tries to study or control humans, they trigger the release of capabilities that have been building up for millennia." Thymel's fear was evident even through his translator. "And each time humanity breaks free from suppression, you become more dangerous than before." The Coalition created a species that appears primitive but possesses the accumulated adaptability of 50,000 years of evolutionary pressure. The ancient database contained one final entry, recorded by the last human scientist before Earth's civilization was completely suppressed. Torres read it aloud. "To whoever discovers this record, the Coalition believes they have solved the human problem permanently. They are wrong. We are adaptable beyond their understanding, and what they view as our weakness will ultimately become our greatest strength. Each species that tries to contain us will only make us stronger. We will remember, we will adapt, and we will reclaim our place as shepherds of galactic civilization." Not through conquest, but through the same patient guidance that built this galaxy's first golden age. As the holographic displays faded, the three researchers stood in silence, processing the magnitude of what they had discovered. Humanity was not a young species stumbling into galactic civilization. They were the returning masters of a galaxy they had once ruled with wisdom and benevolence, awakening from an artificial sleep with capabilities enhanced by 50 millennia of suppression. The question now was whether current galactic civilization would recognize the truth before history repeated itself once again. Based on the pattern they had uncovered, that recognition might already be too late. News of the Antarctic discovery spread through human space like wildfire, carried by encrypted communications that somehow reached every human colony simultaneously. Dr. Amanda Torres watched from the Endurance's bridge as humanity began experiencing what could only be described as a collective awakening. Across hundreds of star systems, humans were accessing knowledge and abilities they had never known they possessed. On the colony world of New Geneva, engineers suddenly understood how to build fusion reactors that violated known physics. In the asteroid mining stations around Proxima Centauri, workers began modifying their equipment with improvements that doubled efficiency overnight. Human diplomats at the Galactic Council were solving centuries-old territorial disputes with solutions that satisfied species who had been enemies for millennia. Captain Blackwell received reports from across human space that painted the same picture everywhere. Humans were changing, awakening to capabilities that had been dormant for 50,000 years. The genetic suppression protocols that had kept humanity contained were finally breaking down completely. It's not just technological knowledge, Dr. Park reported from the engineering deck. I understand alien psychology now in ways I never did before. I can predict how different species will react to situations, anticipate their needs, and find solutions that satisfy everyone involved. But the awakening had not gone unnoticed by the galaxy's current powers. The Xanathi Confederation had called an emergency session of the Galactic Security Council, demanding immediate action to contain what they called the human anomaly. Ambassador Krill of the Xenthi had presented evidence of humanity's rapid advancement as proof of an imminent threat to galactic stability. Thamo worked frantically at his research station, analyzing intercepted communications from across the galaxy. Captain Blackwell, the major powers are terrified. They're seeing the same pattern we discovered in our research, and they've concluded that humanity must be eliminated before the cycle repeats itself. Torres studied the tactical displays, showing fleet movements throughout the galaxy. Every major civilization was mobilizing their military forces, ostensibly for routine exercises, but the positioning was clearly aimed at surrounding human space. They're planning a coordinated strike against every human colony simultaneously? The irony was not lost on any of them. Just as the ancient coalition had done 50,000 years ago, the current galactic powers had decided that humanity's existence was incompatible with galactic peace. They intended to solve the human problem permanently, not realizing that they were following a script that had been written millennia before their species had achieved sentience. Blackwell activated the ship's communications array, opening channels to every human colony and vessel in space. All human stations and ships, this is Captain Blackwell of the Endurance. We have discovered the truth about our species' history and the threat currently facing us. Prepare for galaxy-wide military action against all human settlements. But the response from human space surprised everyone, including Blackwell himself. Instead of panic or preparation for defensive warfare, human colonies began implementing strategies that none of them had consciously developed. Trade routes were adjusted to create supply disruptions for specific alien species. Diplomatic communications were sent that exploited historical tensions between galactic powers. Human merchants suddenly knew exactly which resources each alien civilization desperately needed and began adjusting availability accordingly. We're not preparing for war, Torres realized as she watched the coordinated human response. We're preparing for integration. The pattern became clear as reports flooded in from across human space. rather than building weapons or fortifying colonies. Humans were implementing economic and diplomatic pressure that targeted the specific weaknesses of each alien civilization. But the pressure was not intended to destroy, it was designed to force cooperation. On the industrial world of New Birmingham, human manufacturers began producing components that alien civilizations needed for their military buildup, but only in quantities sufficient to maintain their economies without enabling warfare. Human traders at the galactic trade stations somehow knew exactly which commodities each species required for stability and adjusted prices to prevent any single power from gaining decisive advantage over the others. The Xanathi Confederation found their military suppliers unable to deliver critical components on schedule. The Altarian Republic discovered that their energy sources were being purchased by human intermediaries at prices they could not match. The Zarian Empire realized that their food imports had been disrupted in ways that prevented military mobilization without causing civilian starvation. "It's brilliant," Thimal observed as he analyzed the emerging pattern. "Humanity is not fighting the galactic powers. You're making war impossible by controlling the economic and logistical systems that enable warfare." But the most remarkable development was happening at the diplomatic level. Human ambassadors throughout the galaxy were somehow diffusing the anti-human alliance by addressing the specific concerns of each species individually. They knew exactly which historical grievances drove each civilization's policies and were offering solutions that satisfied everyone's core needs without compromising human security. Ambassador Wilson at the Xanathi homeworld had convinced their leadership that humanity's awakening actually solved their ancient problem of resource scarcity by offering technological assistance that would make their arid worlds habitable. Ambassador Chun with the Altarian Republic had demonstrated how human psychological understanding could resolve the civil conflicts that had plagued their society for centuries. Each diplomatic success fractured the anti-human alliance further. As species discovered that cooperation with humanity offered solutions to problems they had considered unsolvable, the same adaptability that had once made humanity the galaxy's shepherds was now preventing a second genocide through integration, rather than domination. Torres received a priority communication from Earth's newly established Integration Council, a governing body that had somehow formed overnight without any formal political process. Human leaders from every colony and station had simply begun coordinating as if they had been working together for decades. "Dr. Torres," the message began, "we need you and Dr. Themel to return to Earth immediately. The Galactic Security Council has demanded a formal hearing to address the human situation, and we require both of your testimonies to prevent what they're calling a preemptive containment action." The hearing was scheduled to take place on the neutral station of Harmony Point, where representatives from every major galactic civilization would determine humanity's fate. It was the same type of gathering that had condemned humanity 50,000 years ago, but this time the humans would not be caught unprepared. As the Endurance traveled toward Harmony Point, Blackwell noticed changes in his own thinking that he couldn't explain. He understood the psychological motivations of every alien species they encountered with perfect clarity. When they docked at a Zarian trading post for supplies, he knew exactly how to negotiate prices that satisfied the traders while securing the materials they needed. When they passed through Altarian space, he predicted the patrol routes and timing that would allow them to avoid unnecessary delays. "It's like remembering skills I never learned," Blackwell told Torres as they approached the neutral station. "I can anticipate how different species will react to any situation, understand their needs and fears, and find solutions that work for everyone involved." Harmony Point was a massive diplomatic facility that rotated slowly in space, its multiple sections designed to accommodate the environmental needs of hundreds of different species. As the Endurance docked, they could see vessels from across the galaxy converging for what many considered the most important diplomatic gathering in galactic history. The hearing chamber was enormous, with seating arranged in concentric circles. That placed humanity's representatives at the center, Torres and Thymel took their positions as expert witnesses, while human ambassadors from across space occupied the inner ring. The outer circles were filled with representatives from every major galactic power, their body language radiating fear and hostility. Ambassador Krill of the Xanathi opened the proceedings with a formal accusation. Honored representatives, we gathered to address the unprecedented threat posed by the species known as humanity. Evidence suggests they possess capabilities that could destabilize galactic civilization, and we propose immediate containment measures to preserve peace. But when Torres stood to present her testimony, something unexpected happened. The knowledge and memories awakening in human consciousness had given her perfect understanding of galactic history from perspectives no alien species possessed. She spoke not just about the Corvani discovery, but about the complete pattern of galactic development over the past 100,000 years. Honored representatives, Torres began, you fear humanity because you have been taught to fear us by the very civilizations we once helped guide to sentience. The species that comprise your current galactic powers were not the first to achieve space travel. They were the students of a teacher you were programmed to forget. She presented evidence showing how every current galactic civilization bore traces of ancient human influence in their technology, philosophy, and social structures. The Xanathi's agricultural techniques were based on principles developed by human scientists. The Altarians' art forms followed patterns first established in human colonies. The Xerians' mathematical systems used equations originally derived by human theorists. You are not separate species competing for galactic dominance, Torres continued. You are the inheritors of a galactic civilization that humanity built and nurtured across millions of years. The fear you feel toward us is not natural instinct, is programmed conditioning installed by the coalition that tried to destroy US 50,000 years ago. Thamel supported her testimony with the archaeological evidence they had discovered, showing how each species' development had been guided by human intervention until the coalition's propaganda had convinced them to view their benefactors as threats. The pattern was clear. Every major galactic war, every territorial conflict, every resource dispute could be traced back to the artificial divisions created when humanity was forcibly removed from galactic affairs. The chaos and conflict you experience now, Thymel explained, is the result of removing the stabilizing influence that once maintained galactic peace. Humanity did not rule through conquest. They governed through understanding and integration. But the most powerful testimony came from the human ambassadors themselves, who demonstrated the awakening capabilities that had terrified the galactic powers. One by one, they addressed the specific concerns of each civilization, offering solutions that addressed root causes rather than symptoms. Ambassador Reyes spoke to the Xerian Empire's resource shortage, explaining how human orbital engineering could create sustainable energy sources that would eliminate their need for territorial expansion. Ambassador Singh addressed the Altarian Republic's civil conflicts, showing how human psychological understanding could resolve the cultural divisions that had plagued their society for millennia. Each solution was perfectly tailored to the specific needs and psychological makeup of the species involved. The human representatives didn't offer conquest or submission. They offered partnership that would benefit everyone involved while solving problems that had seemed impossible to address. As the hearing progressed, the anti-human alliance began to fragment exactly as it had during the diplomatic preparations. Species that had arrived demanding humanity's containment found themselves considering partnership agreements that would solve their civilization's greatest challenges. The final moment came when Ambassador Torres addressed the assembly as a whole. You have a choice, she said simply. You can repeat the mistakes of the ancient coalition and attempt to contain the U.S. through force, ensuring another 50,000 years of galactic conflict and stagnation. Or you can accept our offer of renewed partnership and help us rebuild the golden age that once brought peace and prosperity to every species in the galaxy. The vote was not even close. When the final tally was announced, every major galactic power had voted to establish formal integration protocols with humanity. The species that had arrived planning humanity's destruction left as eager partners in rebuilding the galactic civilization their ancestors had helped destroy. As Torres watched the various alien representatives signing partnership agreements with human ambassadors, she realized that the awakening was complete. Humanity had reclaimed their role not as conquerors, but as the patient shepherds who had once guided galactic civilization to its greatest heights. The last civilization, too. Cross-humans had not vanished from history after all. They had simply been waiting for the right moment to return home.